Stephen King once wrote, "The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and it's what we'll remember in the end." The weighty truth of these words has stuck with me for so very long since I first heard them. The anxious tension, and so desperately wanting to know, and yet not knowing. It cloys at you. It is an itch inside the soul and mind that shudders and aches in its failures to scratch it. So let me begin with a severe warning. A very severe warning. I adore the Big O, but the Big O is itself one immense, layered, beautiful unknown. It hung in my mind for so many years because of that sweet agonizing mystery. How it haunted me then. But you see, I broke that foggy mirror. Against all odds, I scratched that itch. I found the light. So this is my warning. Should you watch this video, there will be generic spoilers, of course. But beyond that, I will now, today, once and for all, wipe away the clouds from that mystery. Remove the mist and fog from that mirror, and reflect the thing calling itself truth and knowledge. So, should you not want that, should you want to savor that agonizing mystery, by all means, ignore my words and return you to the bed of comfortable, ignorant sleep. I would not blame you. I will not despise you. Merely leave a like and a comment to turn the gears of this damnable, mechanized, blind shoggoth of a website. For the rest, I know deep down that perhaps, in showing you the truth, that one day, far, far in the future, hopefully, when you are surrounded by your family, dying of old age, or perhaps being rushed in the back of an ambulance, or in an alleyway that you really didn't think would be the last place you would see, you probably will not think of any of what I have just told you, will tell you today, nor of a strangely unique show which happened to be made at the end of the last century of the last millennium. As your mortal life slips away, the mystery of the Big O will be a distant, unimportant memory. In removing this mystery, it will pass, as all solved mysteries do, far behind you into the past, like sand through an hourglass, lost to time. For as surely as unsolved mysteries haunt us from the shadows of the unknown, solved ones do fade into the imperfect photo of memory, left in the light of truth, bleached and dissolved by that light and time. So consider yourself warned. Step backwards into safe, dark ignorance, or step forward into the blinding sun of truth with me now. As always, a most gracious thank you to the patrons and Skuttlefish who generously make this possible. To be honest, I could use quite a few more of you if I'm to continue justifying this whole deal. But I digress. As a particular special thank you, this video was also greatly made possible by the efforts of the Big O Archive. Its author, Andy, did a spectacular job collecting as much information on this, quite admittedly niche show, including his personal interviewing of Adult Swim staff. So a very big thank you, indeed. The one other, well, let's keep him mysterious at the moment. He will come into play much later, but you know who you are. You gave me just the guidance that I needed, so thanks. With that, let us gather the musicians, gather the actors, find the conductor and director, and as always set the stage with the time and place. For how can we truly perform without all that? Without a show, how can you have showtime? In the simplest sense, the creation and lead-up to the Big O could be defined as a passionate expression of nostalgia. In this and the next part, we will see exactly what that means in both halves. For now, we are going to focus on the Japanese side, the Japanese people, who channeled that into creating this show. Really, the Big O's creation can be traced, even more specifically, to two other, extremely nostalgia-driven projects. The first was the masterpiece of Japanese traditional animation, Giant Robo, The Day the Earth Stood Still. This work is locked in for a video of its own one day for sure. But for now, all we need focus on is the fact exactly that it was made. It is a huge nostalgic, retro-futuristic wuxia throwback to the works of Mitsuteru Yokoyama, a titan of manga on par with Tezuka for his influences. Creator of Tetsujin 28 Go, one of the foundational works of mecha, director Yasuhiro Imagawa had Giant Robo be this grand project in tribute to the many works of Yokoyama. You see, in the 90s, the OVA market, that is, the original video animation market, was a grand display of revivals for older properties, with the skill and practice craft of that time. For Sunrise, from Orgus 2 to the Gundam OVAs, to Macross Plus, they funded a plethora of just such things. But who was the market? Ultimately, it was very similar to those people who made the things in the first place. Namely, fans who grew up. Fans of the original works who could directly buy and afford and fund all these specific OVA projects. That's really the origin of this whole format, in Laserdiscs or VHS. Basically, most of the restrictions which were placed on TV animation were lifted. And as such, of these projects, Giant Robo stands out as a titan of that nostalgia. 7+ hours of movie-grade animation, a production that took most of the 90s to complete. Not really being based on any exact source material, but rather a wide spectrum of inspirations, let's say. No work since has been so epic in scale or ambitious in terms of its production and detail. Well, except for the other emperor of the OVAs, but that's as well for another time. Anyways, of the nerds who grew up enjoyed the animation industry. 2 in particular would meet on Giant Robo. 2 of the 3 integral to our story. The story of Big O, Keiichi Sato and Kazuyoshi Katayama. Both of them would define their work in creating the Big O as likewise nostalgic-driven. Sato's background is in the design and direction side of animation, having worked on a multitude of projects going back 40 years, all the way from Ganso to Getter Robo Go, City Hunter and OVAs, and on Lupin III, and even Gundam Unicorn. He also did character design for a number of Super Sentai series, including Akiba Ranger. Katayama likewise has worked on a huge range of projects, from Fullmetal Panic's Invisible Victory all the way back to Lupin III's second TV series, Keroro Gunso, Better Man, Maison Ikoku, doing mainly directing, storyboarding, and occasionally original story production. Returning to Giant Robo, one thing it was not was financially hugely profitable. The giant work had faced delays in its final episodes down to what many say, but I have not confirmed, to be gaps in funding as the scale of the work grew. This spurred Katayama to consider a new project which could make back more of that profit. Now I know this next sentence may sound supremely odd, but yes, the Big O, a hugely nostalgia-driven, stylistic niche work with a downright cryptic plot, was supposed to be more of a toy commercialism-oriented thing than Giant Robo. That is to say, mecha fans were eating pretty good in the 90s, when a spin-off project seen as commercial in comparison to Giant Robo could still become perhaps one of the most visually unique mecha works and anime works in general. But what do I mean when I say toy and commercialism exactly? Now most people will imagine something like a toy kids would play with, perhaps. Or maybe the Gunpla kits aimed at a slightly older audience, perhaps. But something else was unveiled in 1997, the Soul of Chogokin line. For those with no idea what that even is, what OVAs were to TV anime, Chogokin was to the plastic Gundam the 6th grade Japanese student whips over a fence. Chogokin are pricey, nicely detailed, ideally, and could be seen as a luxury brand. This was always more of their target. This was the commercial drive. But that only gets us to the toys, or action figures, collectibles, whatever you want to call them. What was the heart of the nostalgia that drove this project? Well, largely by resisting other mecha works. From the Anime Play 2004 Summer Edition interview with Keiichi Sato. I wanted to create a robot anime capable of toy merchandising that was different from the Gundam concept. I felt I could do this by giving the anime a sensibility similar to American TV dramas. Sato and Katayama would further elaborate on the Big O DVD interviews, noting, Katayama, ever since Gundam, all body parts, chest, stomach, and hips, etc., have all been square. Sato, composed of blocks and looking rather industrial. Katayama, I hated those. That's why we decided not to separate the chest and hips from the body. This insistence on more of an old-school approach would ironically end up torpedoing any mainstream commercial angle. But also, that same unique approach was what ended up getting the project funded. According to Great Mechanics 5 from 2002, Katayama was told, "There's no insurance for profit. It would be better if it had a Gundam-like design." And noting that within the project an atmosphere of, "we should rather do Gundam than take a risk," emerged. In response, Sunrise stepped in instead of Bandai Visual and funded the project. So yeah, Big O, a retro nostalgic-driven work, would end up ditching the more commercial angle for a more artistic freedom and integrity, and in the process become a follow-up to Giant Robo, another equally retro-driven, creatively free project. Similarly, at least in Japan, Big O would not take in the Dash. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, because, as you may remember, another person was rebelling against Gundam's by then mechanical, blocky hegemony, Hideaki Anno. In my Char's Counterattack review, I mentioned his new Gundam design, and by 1996 and 97, when the Big O was taking shape in production, there was another little show he made kicking around, Neon Genesis Evangelion. In many ways, Evangelion was a parallel evolution of a project to the Big O. Both wanted a retro-futuristic approach in design and elements. Both were entirely original anime productions, not driven from a game or manga, and not a follow-up or a prestige sequel to 80s shows. They both did something similar, but I would note here, and I would note this very strongly, I would not use the term copied outright. The process, as I just mentioned, was really evolution in parallel. If Evangelion was Pulp Fiction, then the Big O was the usual suspects. Two non-linear crime dramas, filmed and set in LA, carried by the strength of their script above all else. But let's also not get ahead of ourselves to the Western stuff either quite yet. Just think of it in this way. The same method or approach, even a few shared inspirations, but not the same execution in the end, or the same style. On the one hand, you have the shared stuff, like some of the mechanical design. Sato and Katayama note themselves that Eva gave them confidence to shirk the Gundam trend. Eva affected us a lot. After seeing its waist composed of vertebrae-like pieces, we agreed, this, the Big O, won't be another block type. So we went for multiple joints. Both anime also cite the Jerry Anderson Thunderbirds productions as a key inspiration. But also, Sato mentions from the Viz manga interviews, the popular pattern in anime is a boy in agony as the main character. I don't want to have anything to do with that. When I was a young boy, I adored cool guys. I thought a cool adult should be the main character of a robot anime. The part of me that loves cool robots and the part of me that loves heroes were merged into a single thing, in the Big O. And even for a lot of the overall mechanical design, there was a discreet pushing back against Ikoto Yamashita's very influential Evangelion approach. The Big O uses robots with old-school, gimmicky features, like older Japanese anime robots. Weapons pop out when the parts are opened. I was seeing all the other animations as bad examples that were overly influenced by Evangelion. I told the producers that it's easy to make products that go with the flow, but when creating anime, the creators must emphasize what makes his work original. I am perverse because I like to go against the flow of animation trends. So as you can see, both works were pushing back in different but parallel ways. Katayama would helm the series as original work creator, director, and series composition, with Sato contributing animation, characters, designs, mechanical designs, including that of the Big O itself. And do I gotta say that the Big O is cool, as a design. It's awesome. It's such a nostalgia-fueled throwback, from its huge punching arms to its Art Deco radiator or radio chest decorations, the stained glass and wrought iron modernist details in its head and torso, the massive rivets in its almost cast iron body. It rocks. I especially love how many of its attacks are just built in. Do a cool pose, and the Chrome Buster shoots. Head beams, guns, rockets, the Moby Dick anchors, and the big impact pile bunker. The whole carry-through sequence of the piston charging, the punch landing, and then the big impact going off. It's a masterpiece. It's wonderful. But, as I said, there were 3 key players that made the Big O. The last big name, which I think really defined the Big O, is Chiaki J. Konaka. Konaka's credits here are, likewise, quite huge. As writer, he would helm Serial Experiments Lain, Ultraman Taiga, Gaia, and Max, Digimon, of which he did a few seasons, Razafon, so on, and so on, and so on. Konaka is hugely influential in his own way as well. What Konaka brought to the Big O is his use of mystery, obscure cultural stories, and a lot of horror elements in the gothic tone. Now of course, there were many other writers beyond Konaka. Kenichi Hasegawa, who also worked on Taiga and Devilman Lady. Shin Yoshida, funnily enough, wrote multiple Onimusha games. And Masano Akahashi did episodes of The Big O. But Konaka stands out because, even admittedly by those other writers, he took a commanding voice in shaping the series and its notable mysteries. Konaka took charge in writing episodes 1 through 4 right off the bat, and from the DVD interviews. Hasegawa. With The Big O, after I skimmed through the first few episodes, I became afraid that the entire story would be drastically changed if I wrote something slightly wrong. I had a strong impression that Mr. Konaka's color was dominating the story. Konaka. In the case of The Big O, we had things as the premise from Mr. Sato and Mr. Kariyama that they created. Then we started the quest for the deeper understandings of the story from that point. Sort of like, what was this actually? I think I felt the exact same anxiety as Mr. Hasegawa. That is why I decided to ask to write the first episode. I wanted to drag the entire story into my own world at once. We will return to Konaka. Oh boy. For now though, I want to make note of a few more important folks. For the main cast, an interesting and mixed bunch would play the lead roles. Mitsuru Miyamoto would play Roger Smith, the suave lead in his constant black suit and tie. This would be Miyamoto's first lead role. I usually play a sort of spineless character, so I feel grateful for an opportunity to play a hero. Since I'm a big fan of W3 by Tezuka, I enjoyed Roger because his character is very similar to that of Koichi Hoshi, an older brother of the main character in W3. Sato and the Big O's tie-in manga creator, Hitoshi Ariga, commenting from the Viz Media interview. Sato. He's not a character you would draw looking immature. His biggest influence was during the recording sessions for episode 1. Ariga. Mitsuru Miyamoto's voice is Roger. Sato. Yeah, that settled it. He has a really sexy voice. For the sassy android girl, Dorothy, Akiko Yajima will be cast. Yajima's list of credits is, it's too long. Any young boy in a Japanese thing, Yajima is usually the go-to choice. A perfect summation of this is that she played the titular Shin-chan of Crayon Shin-chan for almost 30 years. Sato mentioning from the Viz Media interviews. But we figured out that Akiko Yajima would do a good job. We're mostly worried that she would fit too perfectly. That's why she's not doing it exactly as the casting criteria dictated. But we put into consideration that je ne sais quoi. We did have worries, but I'm glad we went with Yajima. She was also Relena Peacecraft in Gundam Wing. From the DVD interviews, Yajima comments, "Since she, Dorothy, is an android, she sometimes talks flat, but you can't do that for all the lines. It was difficult for me to control that because I'm human. This was a great experience and a big challenge for me." Konaka. In reverse, Miss Yajima's work on her TV series is my model for building the characters of Dorothy. Today's script was naturally based on her acting. Karayama. I agree, even though Dorothy is an android, the human characteristics that exude from her make the character more interesting. Needless to say, Miss Yajima projects a great deal of presence behind the character. Dan Daston, the head of police, will be played by Taisho Genda, who funnily enough played Desert Rommel in Double Zeta, Rodin in all the Bayonetta games, and Japanese Optimus Prime. Most importantly though, he played the giant Moai head in the Japanese dub of Night at the Museum. Angel, the femme fatale, was played by Emi Shinohara, who played Kaho Mizuki in Cardcaptor Sakura and Sailor Jupiter. Norman is played by Motomo Kiyokawa, who would also play Gargoyle in Nadia of Blue Water and Fuyutsuki in Evangelion. He seemingly can't get away from the elderly number 2 role. Kiyokawa mentions, "I like Norman because he has a great presence without so many words. I think his character was enhanced more by not talking." For the wonderful antagonist, Schwarzwald, Katsunosuke Hori was cast. For my longtime viewers, he is the constant voice of Earth Federation Supreme Commander Revel. He's also Lutz in Legend of the Galactic Heroes, and Fu in Fullmetal Alchemist. His casting in particular was highlighted by Sato and Kariyama in the Viz manga interview. Ariga. Episode 10, The Winter Night Phantom, is a tearjerker. Schwarzwald's voice was good too. Ariga. Yes, he was cool. Sato. Katsunosuke Hori was a direct request from the director, Karayama. I've always loved Hori. Sato. Ever since you got into this industry? Ariga. It had to be his voice. Katayama. Someone intelligent who's gone crazy. Sato. When we were recording episode 12, The Enemy is Another Big, the film didn't make it in time again, which is to say there were production issues delaying getting the dub ready. But his craziness was awesome. When we put the clown costume on him, I really didn't know how it would turn out. Speaking of Gundam, Amuro Rei's voice actor, Toro Furia, would make a guest appearance as Bonnie Fraser. Another single episode performance which stands out is that of Tsukiko Tamagawa. Fun fact is the voice of all the Tachikomas in Ghost in the Shell, playing Sybil Rowan. To further fill out the Lupin III bonanza within the Big O, Ogoro Naya, the OG Zenigata, would voice Gordon Rosewater. And as one final interesting note, the big bad Alex Rosewater, his son, would be played by Unsho Ishizuka, voice of Jet Black and Joseph Joestar. Oh, and Heihachi Thunderfist Mishima himself. So, with that, you should now have a good idea of who made the Big O, who played its parts, and how Sato, Konaka, and Katayama arrived from a desire of nostalgia to craft such a show. Of course, I really haven't mentioned its most defining feature at all. And remember how I said that nostalgia is a driving force in 2 parts? Well, it's time to address just that. It's time to take the G up to 23rd Street and take the F over through Uptown and get off at 34th Street and 6th Avenue. Hey, I'm walking here! After the dramatic short intro of episode 1, what of the Big O do we end up seeing? There's a stylish streetlight that changes color. Steam billows out of grates on the street. An assortment of people go through their daily jobs, bundled up lightly in jackets and scarves, only to notice a passing car, equally as stylish, that drives past. A landscape of brown brick buildings, freeways, run-down industrial places, Gothic architecture, Art Deco, and a bit of classical. The rest of the episode furthers this. From the classy penthouse of the apartment of Roger Smith, our main character and negotiator, to a city topped in massive wrought iron domes, of soaring Gothic skyscrapers, classical column-straddled banks, Art Deco installations all throughout. But even more, what all of it is Western. It is without question a place saturated in the imagery of New York, the iconic East Coast metropolis of the United States. This is one of the most pressing and iconic aspects of the Big O. Its Western DNA quite vividly on display here. Why is there steam coming out of the road? Well, because New York City actually has a steam-powered air conditioning network that dates back to the 1880s. Why the long straddled freeways, tunnels, and bridges which appear? Because New York was the largest and first city to integrate them into its urban flesh. Even the massive domes, perhaps as those who saw my Armor Corps video may remember, could be inspired by Buckminster Fuller's admittedly pretty insane proposal for a way to control the pollution and atmosphere over Manhattan. It is decidedly all Western, American, an American setting for a Japanese giant robot story. But I also want to emphasize here, despite having just said that, it is not so much literally set in New York per se, rather it is set in the idea of a New York. Like Batman's Gotham, or Dick Tracy's Gangland. The vibe, the atmosphere of a Manhattan. From the anime play 2004 interview with Keiichi Sato. I did have Manhattan in mind, but I felt that if we specified the location, we would be bound to and restricted by reality. I wanted the viewer to use his or her imagination. The environment isn't given a place or time. Specifications for robots and machinery were intentionally never disclosed. It may feel incomplete for those fixated on fine details, but we felt the ambiguity made it easier for the audience to enter the world of the Big O. The idea of a New York. As the US attained cultural dominance in the 21st century, it was only natural its icons would likewise become dominant and influential. Images of the Empire State Building, or the now past World Trade Center, Grand Central Station, Central Park, the Brooklyn Bridge, Times Square, and so on. On the Big O's phenomenal soundtrack by Toshishiko Sahashi, which you will hear all throughout this video, many tracks are named after just such locations. We will return to Sahashi in a bit, but really the emphasis on the vibe of New York cannot be done enough. The black and white video for Sting's An Englishman in New York, the monochrome ending of Metal Gear Solid 2. That's what I'm talking about, that feel of falling leaves on a busy street in a bit of rain. The sounds of echoing jazz coming up through the rusted iron fire escapes of some brownstone apartments. The Big O is one big love letter to that feeling. Now here, I will go above and beyond the call of duty, as it is my job to do, because I love mecha, and I love Big O. I will let you in on the first little secret. Now, here, and many other reviews, reviewers in their scripts would write something along the lines of, "The Big O took its gothic influence from the Batman, the animated series, which was very popular at the time, as inspiration for its style. Look, here's even a nice quote backing it up. I wanted to create a robot anime capable of toy merchandising that was different from the Gundam concept. I felt I could do this by giving the anime a sensibility similar to American TV dramas. Of all my influences, it's safe to say that visually, the Big O is closest to Batman. Ah, and look here. Here is one from Adult Swim, Jason DeMarco, showing how instantly the stylistic approach resonated. Most of the Toonami team are people that grew up on giant robot/tokusatsu shows, like Voltron, Ultraman, Gaiking, etc. So we were already primed to love the design of Big O. Combined with the clean, Batman the Animated Series influenced animation, and the great Queen-esque theme song, we felt like it was a show that might connect with a broader audience in the US. But what does that mean? Why was Batman series so influential? This is where I will go beyond. If we can understand that, we can understand how our Japanese mecha show would end up the way that it did. The New York way that it did. In a word, it's very simple. It just comes back to what I already said before. Nostalgia. You see, after the fall of the Berlin Wall in the 90s, it was an odd time. History had ended. Yes, you can laugh very hard right now. But that's how it felt to the folks back then. History is in the competition of ideologies. Communism and capitalism, democratic and autocratic, was over. Yes, once again, feel free to laugh very hard. What this did, as I've mentioned before, for science fiction, for the future, it made us project a kind of vaguely democratic, liberal feeling, Western something forward in time. But it worked both ways. For you see, it had a different, but just as interesting effect backwards in time as well. A strange, detached sense of relief. Well, that all just happened, I guess. The 90s were a time that felt cumulative, as if history, that of the 1900s, now almost over, could be looked back on as in its totality, maybe even fondly despite the tragedies. No show sums this up better than Quantum Leap, a show about a time-traveling man who can go back any year within his lifetime to see major events, mostly in the United States. Argon, that's cool and all. My grandma watches Quantum Leap. This sounds boring. What about Batman? What about the Big O? Aha! Why does your grandma watch it? Nostalgia, baby. To remember bygone days, familiar sights long since past. But also, speaking of Western shows, Mr. Just suck on this. That quote I used earlier. This is it in full. I wanted to create robot anime capable of different merchandising for Gundam. Yes, as I said. I felt like I do this by giving the anime a sensibility similar to the American TV dramas. Blah, blah, blah. Batman! The ITC pieces of the 1960s and 70s. Jerry Anderson's Thunderbirds. And some of the older Spy series. This might sound weird, but the atmosphere is heavily influenced by Bewitched, of all things. There's some Starsky and Hutch in there. I was trying to integrate the witty exchange between characters in overseas dramas. Unlike your traditional, straightforward anime dialogue, I wanted the characters in the Big O to have slick and witty diplomatic conversations. Of all my influences, it's safe to say that visually, the Big O is closest to Batman. So you see, it was this culmination, a love letter built from nostalgia of many Western inspirations. However, let's also return to the Batman question once more. Naturally, if you're looking for cool stylistic periods, hey, the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s are a juicy area. New Jack Swing, a pop genre which would incorporate swing music fused into pop and dance, would ironically pop off with Full Force's Alice, I Want You Just For Me. Its video would incorporate many images of classic big band and noir styles. New Jack Swing would reach its apex in the late 80s and early 90s. In film, you had a neo-noir period starting in the late 70s, but really culminating in a revival of the styles and allure of that time. Some most exemplary works are, ironically, from the 90s. The Batman films themselves, Dick Tracy, The Rocketeer, Who Killed Roger Rabbit, and further, the Coen Brothers film, The Hudsucker Proxy, all the way to, Jim Carrey's The Mask. This resurrection of the style echoed both pulp nostalgia and a, why don't we do this with modern flair approach, resurrecting the appeal in architecture, fashion, mechanical design, and so on. Not entirely unlike what the Japanese anime were doing in the OVAs and the markets of the 90s. Aha! Bet you thought there wouldn't be a parallel there, huh? So, we get a few talented writers and animators at Warner Brothers who came together to channel that nostalgia into a now iconic gothic hero, Batman. It is from this overlap of nostalgia that the Big O would arrive, of Batman's vibe of a city, but also the broader neo-noir aesthetics. As Sato said from the anime play interviews, "Originally I intended to make Roger a private detective, but a private detective was too ordinary. We came up with a different idea of a negotiator. Although it is possible for a private detective to operate a robot, I guess, and he's saying these words, not me, but sure. I thought it would be more fun if the negotiator had a robot. If he's a negotiator, why does the robot always end up destroying things? I made sure the negotiations never worked out, so it's guaranteed that the robot always trashes the place. But the overall composition of the series is drenched in this atmosphere as well. In episode 1 and 2's setup of Roger and the Big O stopping a bank heist, in Roger's penthouse above an abandoned bank, as his version of the Wayne Manor. Norman, his stand-in for Alfred, and so on. Even returning to the music, the absolutely kick-ass opening is 100% an intentional tribute to classic Queen. Here, Sato mentions how they even just went with Mr. Sahashi entirely for the OST explicitly because of that. Yes, some songs go beyond the realm of simply showing respect. That was exactly what was planned. I asked Mr. Sahashi to create a musical score that integrated musical homage that can be recognized by viewers over the age of 30. We chose Mr. Sahashi because he has a frightening amount of musical knowledge about the TV dramas overseas. Saying the Big O has an amazing soundtrack really can't encompass how good it is. From the throwback to the 60s retrofuturism, to the jazz, to the heavy gothic organ and orchestral arrangements, it all fits and works perfectly. As a also completely free fun fact, the high-stakes cooking show Iron Chef would at times randomly use bits of the Big O soundtrack because, hey, it's that good. Moving on just to some of the locations themselves. In episode 3, we get an industrial, mysterious hydroelectric plant. 4 is a throwback to a World Expo, a staple of New York and Chicago. 5 it's just an outright murder mystery. 6's robot-centered plot is also focused on a piano jazz bar tucked away. Over and over, the series is baked with the DNA of Western nostalgia. It is thoroughly Art Deco through and through. No, not diesel punk. If you see someone say diesel punk, place a 3-inch and 3/8 rivet in their forehead immediately. This, overall, makes the Big O a visually extremely unique work. It's a love letter, in essence, to a time. A place and a feeling that is just appealing, if that makes sense. Sato has a nice quote here. "We wanted to differentiate ourselves from other robot anime on TV at the time. Our hero is wearing a suit and sitting in the cockpit. He really can't be shouting the name of the special attack. It was always planned that the main character would operate the robot wearing a suit like 007. Since he looks suave, he can't be shouting. And if Roger is our Batman, Angel is our Catwoman. If Roger is our 007, Angel is our femme fatale. If Roger is our Lupin III, then..." We debated more about Angel. She was the most difficult one. I had an image of her in my mind as like the first Fujiko Mine, Yukiko Nikaido, from Lupin III TV series. But in the auditions, they all played her like the second Fujiko. Argon, what about Dorothy? She's a robot girl." "That doesn't sound like Batman. That sounds like a Japanese anime thing. A robo-cute girl? I mean, come on, right?" Well, about that. She was Konaka's character for sure. But also, Konaka. She's always around, but I felt like it wasn't necessary to have her in each episode. So when I was thinking out the first episode, I guess, it was pretty much easy to deal with. In other words, like Data, right? Konaka, yes. Sato. I was discussing with Mr. Kariyama whether we wanted to make her like Data from Star Trek. And he said something like, at this time? You just want her to have all the funny dialogue. Konaka? Yes. Yes. So no. Even Dorothy is heavily inspired by Western media. I mean, come on. It's in her name. Dorothy R. Wainwright. Wayne, as in Bruce Wayne, and R, this one's a little more tucked away, as in robot, as in R. Daniel Oliva, from Isaac Asimov's Big O Robo Fun Times joke book. So yeah, as you can pretty clearly tell, this is the other half of that nostalgia I was talking about. The Western side. It is very often that folks forget, as insular as Japan may seem at times, creatively it is also very open to trends. Especially Western trends, in influence. For Western music and film, we had Japanese artists create Cowboy Bebop. For a Western hit like Top Gun, we had Macross Plus. For Reservoir Dogs as inspiration, we got Gonin. For more info, see Sato Japan's YouTube channel for his great video on Gonin. Watch it now. Of course, Sato and Kariyama put it much more directly and summed it up well. We're not necessarily denying that we're doing it for our own pleasure, and we're not doing it believing that it's right. But we do it knowingly. We're saying, we know all of these things, so we think everyone else might like a taste of it too. Kariyama. We want people to think of it as its own thing. The world of the Big O. It's an homage. So, with that, you should now have a very, very good idea of just how nostalgia, in both the East and West, helped craft the conditions and designs that would make the unique Manhattan cocktail that is the Big O. With that, we can move on to the substance of the thing itself, and more importantly, to the grand mystery contained within. The format is decidedly simple, but works surprisingly well. Roger, our negotiator, is asked to come in to arbitrate an issue. The issue leads to mystery and an episode-by-episode flavoring. The negotiations, which go somewhat badly, which then leads to Roger summoning the Big O with his signature watch. We get a big, cool fight, and an emotional wrap-up and catharsis. For a series with only an initial limited run of shortened 13 episodes, each is a superbly flavored, rich exploration of a little slice of a deeply alluring world. From the industrial landscapes of Electric City, with its homage to a very Godzilla-like creature gone awry, to the sunken Art Deco city beneath the waves of The Call from the Past, which, to this day, I wonder if inspired Bioshock. Even without being a detective, Roger, with his Bond gadgets of grappling watch and shape-changing lockpick, pierces into the foggy illusions of the city of amnesia. This brings up the rather obvious trait of the show. The entire world of the Big O lost its memories. Beyond 40 years past, no knowledge seems to endure. This is also something I should clarify right now. Memories in the context of the Big O is also said in English, because it's being used to describe something complex. Not just physical memory, for those older than 40 years, but knowledge itself, records, photos, and so on. These things as a whole were erased for some reason. This is the underlying mystery of the Big O. It is the cause of the multiple episode plots. Either the desire for this lost knowledge, or in remembering how to create something from back then. The creation of the robotic Dorothy 1 and 2, of which Dorothy R. Wainwright originates, is linked to this. The creation of the biological weapon of Leviathan in Electric City, or that of the kaiju of Missing Cat. An episode which gives Fullmetal Alchemist a run for its money in its body horror. Something Kariyama emphasized. I hope people can feel the psychological thriller aspects, the horror aspects. This tool was something Konaka outright says was done to force the viewer into the atmosphere of the place directly. Akahashi. The first thing I would do is to ask Mr. Konaka is where you got the idea for the City of Amnesia setting. Konaka. The reason why I did that was because I wanted to make everything smooth. If I had to let the story start from an explanation of why the world is like it is and such, then we would have to make a long avant title from the very beginning of the series. So just forget about it. Like, just for now, let us forget all about what actually happened in the past. It's a genius approach. Rather than making the main character an amnesiac for the audience's vehicle, as is done in a plethora of other stories, the world itself, as a whole, is the amnesia-stricken one. How does Norman, Roger's loyal butler, know to mechanically repair and maintain the Big O? A fragment of knowledge from the past. That's all there is to it. Over the course of these episodes, memory, or the lack of it, the desire to get it back, all play a vital role. And as one with memories buried deep inside, Dorothy comes into the spotlight. The interactions between the two are delightful, still to this day. Dorothy's seemingly cold mechanical nature is a cover for a very sarcastic and sassy female lead. Her small affectations of being able to perfectly play incredibly complex musical pieces, her wind-up doll spring-loaded jumps, Roger's attempted playboy attitude completely bouncing off of Dorothy's personality is always great. But beyond the mechanical is a rather emotionally rich character in Dorothy. Her, as well as Angel, the main catsuit-wearing, on-again, off-again love interest for Roger, also steps in. With both of Roger's female counterparts comes an extremely novel, for anime, severe maturity. The style and approach of the Big O feels positively light years in an ocean away from the typical fan service antics of anime. Sato commented from the Anime Play interview, "You know, women are often more mature than men of the same age. Women in anime have been the image of men's sweet adorations, but that's not real. Some men may feel the women in the Big O are harsh, but I think that's what we were aiming for. Here I disagree somewhat. I don't find Angel or Dorothy harsh, but rather witty and self-agent. Rather than orbiting around Roger as the main male character, Angel and Dorothy's paths cross in and out. Like Fujiko, Angel comes and goes episode to episode, and Dorothy is not even a would-be Batgirl, or really just a female Data from TNG. It's a lot closer, but Data was never this unapologetically sarcastic, and overall, it's pretty wonderful. This next quote, which is in regards to the Roger Lupin III parallel, is kind of funny. During initial development, Mr. Katayama and I thought of who we would cast as actors in the Big O. I don't want to disappoint anyone, but Roger is supposed to be Tom Cruise. His character design was inspired by the very symbolic designs of the characters of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 60s and 70s, and Lupin III. What I find funny here is that there's another, very popular, Adult Swim series with a main character directly inspired in some ways by Lupin III. That is Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. And man, neither of them are anywhere as wacky as Lupin. Both ended up being pretty reserved, occasionally a bit jokey, but the two are very mature, cool guys. For Roger's case in particular, this was entirely, of course, intentional. Sato mentions from the Anime Play interview, "With the Big O, I wanted to provide 6-year-olds a hero they could look up to that still can be appreciated by adults, instead of a hero they can easily identify with. I wanted to give them a hero they can dream of growing up and becoming. My goal was to create an anime that 6-year-olds can enjoy alongside 30 to 40-year-olds. And man, oh man, did they nail that. Roger is genuinely, really friggin' cool. Not even in the gets to pilot a robot called the Big O cool, but just in general. If you showed up dressed like Roger, driving an insane stretch Cadillac, classy, in a black suit and tie and sunglasses, I mean, come on, it's sick as hell. I'd go to a wedding dressed as this. People would notice. This is so astoundingly weird in the world of mecha shows, which often tread the line between maturity and adolescence so wantonly. To have a show notably not try to pander in that way and instead build a character like Roger. Just having a mecha protagonist still in my age range is pretty novel for me. When so many are 14 to 18, Roger, being a nebulous 30-something, is very unique. Sato and Ariga said, just as I mentioned earlier, Sato, he really does look older than he's supposed to be, especially in the anime. He could well be over 30. We try to be conscious of the fact that Americans don't look baby-faced. But even more than that, he's not a character you would draw looking immature. The biggest influence was during the recording session for episode 1. Ariga, Mitsuru Miyamoto's voice is Roger. Sato, yeah, that settled it. He has a really sexy voice. But he isn't some swag is for boys, class is for men meme either. He sleeps in, he's extremely touchy about being neat and tidy, his strange obsession with hourglasses. He isn't just a walking Armani suit ad, he feels like a well-realized protagonist. This is best typified in episode 4, The Underground Terror. Here, Roger's job has taken him to where he dreads to go most, underground. Something about the place just terrifies him to such an extreme extent. He isn't someone without weakness. The dark and the deep do frighten him. But, as I've not mentioned him yet, this is also the first appearance of someone else. Master Schwarzwald. To say Schwarzwald is a personal favorite of mine is a supreme understatement. He is the Joker to Roger's Batman. But unlike the Joker, Schwarzwald is supremely, philosophically driven as a character. A reporter who found out too much, was crippled and burned by the powers of Paradigm City. More than the Joker, more even than the tormented Rorschach of The Watchmen, Schwarzwald is one of my younger self's idols in fiction. A character unwilling to repent in his search for truth, for the knowledge of the world. In case this hour and 30 to 40 something in-depth video doesn't tell you, he had a big impact on me. When I think of how many times I've typed away an essay or a video script, my computer screens and keyboard surrounded by empty instant ramen and hastily written post-it notes, piles of empty cups, the victims of a week-long obsessive burn to find the words, find the form to fit the idea called truth into it. The image of that pursuit, the image that comes to my mind, is Schwarzwald's desk, always. Schwarzwald is also the pilot of Big Duo, the second big of the Big O. A flight-oriented design blending World War II fighter and bomber elements with a striking red color scheme. After all, this is a Japanese mecha show. If Roger is Amuro, then, as Sato mentions. At first, the bandages were cut in a cross shape. He looked a little handsome. I had made him as handsome as a character as Char Aznavour was to Amuro in Anime Mobile Suit Gundam, according to Katayama's vision. But as we kept talking, we decided we should do a different kind of betrayal of anticipation. He could even be a freak. We'd make people wonder what he really looked like under that mask. As memorable as Roger's opening lines of serving a vital role in the city of amnesia are to me, so too are Schwarzwald's "Wake up. Don't be afraid of knowledge. I think you humans who are split into two worlds, unless you want the gulf between humans to expand into oblivion, you must think." It is then my honor to provide you with just that talent, just that answer, and just that truth. The mystery of the Big O. As Master Schwarzwald inspired me, I sought it out and will now for you provide. First though, we must take in the scope of the setting and the two most important players not yet mentioned, that being Paradigm City itself. Paradigm from the Greek paradigma, from the verb paradigmimi, for para or beyond or beside, and daiknimi, to show, expose, or illustrate. It is a philosophical term. The ideal, the model, to demonstrate, to show the paradigm is to show the exemplar model of a thing, to give its witnesses the road to truth. In that way, then, Paradigm City itself is the ideal model, the ideal example of the city itself. But who controls the city? It is not really a democratic state per se. It is the Paradigm Corporation, and the one who controls the corporation is the Rosewater family, Alex Rosewater, and before him his father, Gordon Rosewater. Even the police, including Roger's former chief of Cardinal Destin, is a quasi-corporate entity in the Big O, controlled to some extent implicitly and explicitly by Paradigm itself. When we finally meet Gordon Rosewater in episode 13, the following conversation is truly enlightening, and really the big mystery for fans who couldn't understand it back then. After tracing a series of murders, Roger finds an abandoned building, hiding memories of the past, an orphanage, and his past as well. Memories. For some reason, some of the residents of Paradigm City are remembering information from the past, and are being killed by someone who looks an awful lot just like Dorothy. At this point in the story, the background mystery is no longer in the background at all. It has emerged into the foreground, dragging with it all the unanswered questions. But given what I have said, what is in front of the audience the whole time, would it surprise you to say the answers were already there? Gordon reveals it bluntly to Roger, in the famous tomato scene. Now, would it also surprise you if this was actually inspired by The Godfather? Yeah, it was. What trips people up is that Gordon here is lying to Roger as well, but also telling him the blunt truth. For those afraid of knowledge, of thinking, this unbearable, impenetrable, and obscure statement is brutal. But I am not one of those pathetic creatures.
Think.
To be direct, despite his words, the world was destroyed in a cataclysm. Its evidence is abundant. The sunken ruins, the remnants of the old world abounding, the abandoned tunnels the Big O uses to get around, and most importantly from episode 4, the Expo remains buried right under everyone's feet. The ruins which grow more technologically advanced the deeper you go. And think! What? In the ruins of those ruins, it is that of the Expo, and within them, the archetype. The machine which looks like what lies beneath the Big O's mask. If Paradigm City is the example, then Expo's city in miniature is the prototype. The prototype to both the world and the machine of the Big O. Think to the image of the empty clock tower, time itself literally removed forcibly by the catastrophic. In Roger's flashbacks, the melting face of the clock. Think of how destructive every battle with the Big O is on the city. Is it really the design of a protector, or rather, of a destroyer? Not so strange, is it? Advanced robots, biological life forms, the androids, all are traces of the most advanced past. But then, why lie? Why does Gordon say otherwise? Because of what I've already told you. Who rebuilt afterwards? Who then went on to rule after that devastation? Gordon, and then Alex Rosewater. The paradigm of the city, built by the paradigm of the corporation. Gordon has all motive in the world to lie about the thing which wiped out both memory and knowledge of its happening, because that loss of truth led to his power and rule. Think of the book, Metropolis, as it is titled. Of course, it is another homage, a classic cinema, famous, iconic movie with an android woman. But how does it start? With the wise old masters of that very similar city, planning their great plan for a utopia just for them. A Tower of Babel, paradise for their sons above, and for the workers and slaves, the factories and tunnels below. Starting to get it? Starting to see? DR. The killer herself is just another example. A copy of the androids of the old world, with knowledge of the Big O's signature startup words. Activated by accident well after the cataclysm. It was supposed to serve, seeking out those who hold the dangerous memories of who were truly guilty. The killer was not DR, it was Gordon, and it was the whole of the old world he killed. But he doesn't lie, at least not all of it. He does say a truth. Roger and the others were too young to have lived then. Like the tomato which Roger is reflected in, Gordon was trying to recreate something lost from that old world. Perhaps it was to give rise to someone like Roger, who could protect his new kingdom. Or perhaps it was merely to recreate a jewel lost from that time, to add to his crown. Either way, this is the truth that Schwarzwald found. In finding Big Duo, in finding the archetype, he was disgusted by the lie of the entire world. He punished the opulent, rich, blind fools who were but deaf aristocrats and rulers in this false kingdom. All or many of the other machines in the Big O, all of its fights, most of which are just leftovers of the old world and its destruction, for Roger to conveniently and stylishly eliminate in defense of the city. Gordon is, after all, a happy retired man on his farm, itself one of the only sunny places we ever see in the perpetual overcast of Paradigm City. Now perhaps those clouds beyond the domes are just rain, meant to capture atmosphere, the sense of a New York. Or, perhaps more disturbingly, they are ash. Their very destruction. The remnants of the old world blotting out the light of the sun of truth. So there you have it. As you can see, it was all there, right in front of you. The mystery of the Big O, solved for you by me. With that, we can bring this video to a close. The Big O is one of my favorite series for good reason. Hopefully now you know why, and do please watch it. It is very good. I think it's safe to say, we have come to terms. Are they gone? They should be by now. Of course, it wasn't that simple. Pitiable fools. I wonder how they can live like that. Naturally, we've only just gotten started. We're only halfway through the series. Foreign megadeuces have just shown up. No, now we can get started on the true mystery. Big O. Lights! Camera! Action! There was no surprise. This may not be appropriate, but I thought this is exactly as we had planned. When creating the Big O, the US market was something we always had in mind. During my various visits to the US, I had received a lot of inspiration from the American audience. This was our way of giving something back to the international anime fans. A note of thanks for loving anime as much as they have. I was really happy fans overseas liked the Big O. Unsurprisingly, given Adult Swim and Toonami's cultural influence, and given the Big O's Western appeal, its airings in the US became tremendously popular. Like Cowboy Bebop or Trigun, the Big O, in a way, came home to the place of its inspiration. That's the meaning of Gyakyu-Yunyu-Ninki, to go out and come back, or more specifically, for a piece of art to go out, find an audience, which breathes new life into that work, then for it to return. In the late 70s, a punky reggae band headed by a bleach blonde-haired bassist, who I've already mentioned, called The Police, was trying to make a strong debut. They had had some success in the United Kingdom, but then, like the Big O, it was with their move to gigs in the United States, to Boston and New York in particular, where their performances would reach widespread popular awareness, and their path to stardom truly locked in. This is likely what inspired An Englishman in New York, which I mentioned earlier. But, to the point, the Big O would do likewise. It would be through Adult Swim, or more specifically William Street, the studio and production group in Atlanta, Georgia, that the original scope of the Big O would find its footing. As DeMarco recounted from an interview with Andy, that idea came from Mike Lazo, who runs Adult Swim. He was a big fan of the show and suggested to me that we call Bandai, and see if they might be open to creating another season as a co-production. It's not really that the first season performed particularly well, it's just that we really loved it and wanted more. Andy's interview further notes one of the most interesting things which made the Big O a big deal, that being it was not merely Adult Swim looking to distribute a second season, but co-producing and financing it. Andy, how does it feel to have produced a second season of an anime and bring it back from the dead? Doubly so considering the era. After all, it would be another 13 years before this kind of thing happened again with Fooly Cooly Progressive and Alternative. And your previous involvement with the series. DeMarco. It feels great. I love that show, and I think that people who love it, like yourself, really love it. And the fact that people are still talking about it years later lets me know that we weren't alone in thinking it was something special. With that background in place, we arrive at the other 13 episodes initially promised but then lost to the Eastern production, only to be restored in the West. Really, the biggest victim of the gap in production is the animation. Early computer cell work simply does not have the rich dark tones of the late 90s. It all too often feels overly smooth with gradients that merge in ways traditional cells would never do. The style is still there, but the look, even having grown up with that look, with a good dose of nostalgia for those days, is less than ideal for the Big O, especially when you consider its nature as well as a neo-noir inspired work. While the real world became depressing and desaturated in the early 2000s, it lost the genuine shadows and dark tones at the peak of 90s culture. But, having said all that, the Big O is a unique thing. It's not like we were getting heaps of neo-noir Art Deco mecha series back then, even less so now. The fans of the Big O greatly appreciated it just existing in general. Katayama and Sato were surprised and pleased to find that such a wide audience would enjoy their work so much. Sato: well, we never know how old the audience is for the Big O. We get emails and mail from junior high kids, high school kids, people in vocational schools. We got a letter from someone who could just barely remember the time Apollo 11 landed on the moon. It's amazing, you just never know with the Big O. So Season 2 is one I still enjoy, because I know just how rare its creation is. Like with Season 1, I won't go into each episode or try to summarize. Rather, I'll focus on the bigger stuff. Season 2 really hones in a lot on a far less episodic and far more overarching series of plot points. The introduction of the Union, a foreign power trying to influence and pull the strings within Paradigm. Considering up until now we've only seen a handful of locations, and most of them are in the direct vicinity of the city, this is pretty intriguing. The insinuation that the rest of the world is just a wasteland, that there is no other nations, let alone no other cities such as Paradigm exist. The revelation of Leviathan, a Megadeus, which reduces all it touches to sand, and in those wastelands further reinforcing that the old world is swept away forever. But the Union themselves are also fascinating. They are coded specifically in a French way. The foreign Megadeuses are neat, but they are certainly kaiju-ish designs. However, their names are taken from revolutionary French figures. And also, the other element of their design is Art Nouveau as well. The leader of the Union, and the agents in the city, Vera, sports the classic hair curls of the wealthy aristocratic lady. Of course, made popular in anime by Rose of Versailles, making Vera and Jury of Revolutionary Girl Utena distant cousins. This French revolutionary theme is what is important though. It draws my attention, and now yours, to the fact that before New York, Paris was honestly the strongest contender for cultural epicenter of the Earth. There is just a haunting insinuation that Angel as well, with her very Fujiko-like ability to pop up seemingly anywhere, using her looks and sly personality, could be a daughter of both Vera and the Union as a whole. From this, Alex Rosewater also emerges as the inevitable antagonist to Roger. Many of the city's ills are traced back to Paradigm, and it is with Paradigm they are traced back directly to Alex. He now conspires with the Union agent, Alan Gabriel, to make plans and machinations against that of his father, though to what ends throughout most of the episodes are uncertain. It is with his efforts that within the destroyed Union machines, the parts for the final Big, seen only in flashback, emerge. Big Foul. There is also perhaps one of the funniest episodes, with Beck's alliance with the obviously Orientalist caricatures, and their extremely super robot-y Beck the Great RX-3. It's funny on the level of Japanese creators using a Western-themed work to make some fun of themselves. The Big O also gets a really sick arm-mounted Vulcan cannon, which is dope. Really though, the shift from episodic to overarching starts to put a lot of pressure on the character dynamics. There's definite shifts away from the will-they-won't-they aspect of the first 13 episodes, to Angel and Roger almost verging on something more serious. Of course, it is ultimately the character dynamic between Dorothy and Roger which gets the real highlight. By the end of the season, you feel it leans a lot more romantically towards that end of things. And in perhaps the funniest twist, Schwarzwald is revealed to simultaneously be dead, and still influencing events anyways, as he does during the battle between the repaired Big Duo and Big O. But with that note of Master Schwarzwald, we really can't dance around it anymore. As Katayama notes, the name Schwarzwald, Black Forest, signifies the insanity, the primal scars in the European psyche. A long time ago, Europe was covered in dense forests, and you didn't know what lurked in the darkness. There was a lust for conquest that was inversely proportional to the fear. The Black Forest, It is time to remove those dark shadows, as Master Schwarzwald tried to do, to overcome the fear of truth. I know I faked things out before, but now it truly is time, with this second season, to unfold the mystery of the Big O, the nature of the world of Paradigm City in that thing called truth, or most importantly, if it ever even existed at all. Perhaps one of my all-time favorite films is one that I only saw well after it had come out. Much like The Big O. It, in many ways, is a simple story. The story of one person's life. But it is also about so much more. Starring Philip Seymour Hoffman and directed by Charlie Kaufman, it is a richly layered piece of art. It has been in my top 10 films essentially since I first saw it all those years ago now. The story is that of an artist, a playwright, whose personal life is kind of a mess. His wife leaves him, he loses his daughter, but he also gains near infinite funding to work on his magnum opus, a play based on his own life, set within a gigantic warehouse in New York City. As the story progresses, the man only grows more and more obsessed with the capturing of the minutiae of his life in ever-increasing detail. He hires a man obsessed with him to play his own part, until at last he has recreated a simulation, or perhaps more likely a simulacra, of the real world. A model of the New York outside, which was the setting of his life. A paradigm, if you would. Beyond the buildings, huge spotlights hang. Everything from the pedestrians to major persons in his life are acted out. The line between the real world and his constructed one fades. Fades until, as an old man, he gives up everything, even being the director. So lost in this work that he becomes an actor acting out a role in a story based on his life. The two having become one. Towards the end of the story, some kind of catastrophe befalls this false city. The man, having been so long lost of control, grows old and dies within this shell of a world. It is a beautiful film. The funeral scene in particular is perhaps one of the most powerfully written existential statements of art ever conceived. Now, for those unfamiliar with the Big O, this tangent may seem odd, but to me the really odd thing is that this work was made and released in 2008, a full 4 years after the Big O's second season. Was Charlie Kaufman copying it? No, I don't think so. I think something bigger is driving this cosmic coincidence, much like the nostalgia-driven 90s which led to the Big O's creation in the first place. Season 2 of the Big O opens with Roger waking up in a normal world. The bank is not his personal residence, but just a bank. Beck is rich and wealthy. The sky is bright blue. There are no giant mecha gods. He is ragged and poor, and out of place in a world like ours, and not that of the Big O. As the season comes around to its climax, one revelation after another swamps any preconceived notions. The Union, built up as an antagonist faction, is mostly a paper tiger. The inhabitants merely revealed to be those rejected from the city for their incompatible nature. There is simply no other place. Only Paradigm. Only this city. The military police fire into the sky to shoot down the perceived illusion of the enemy air force. Only for it to be revealed, giant stage lights hang above, like Synecdoche, New York. Below the city, huge gears sit as well. All one big stage, like Synecdoche, New York. Angel is not the daughter of Vera. The memories were fake. And what's more, Roger is not a clone at all, but someone who made some kind of deal with Gordon Rosewater. Though the nature of that deal, and the fact that it would mean Roger was present at the city's founding, despite his age, only add to the mystery. Roger flashes back to other Paradigm cities, other versions of this world, as Alex Rosewater and Roger battle, Big O versus Big Fow. Angel descends into the depths of the city. She finds the false stage used to forge the false memories. Going deeper, she only finds more and more mystery, until at last, after the great climax, after the ruined Big Duo crashes into the stage lights above, after Big O's final stage, appears the most strongest one of all, Big Venus. With every step, it reduces the city to nothingness. exposing the raw grid of the simulated world. Roger makes his most moving speech, speaking about how memories are important, but so too is living as a human, right now. At last, Big Venus and the Big O fuse, and our series and world is reset. We end as episode 1 began, as Synecdoche New York repeats in its story. The end is built into the beginning. This leaves normally many people upset, confused, or overwhelmed. Yet at the same time, it is something of a satisfying, grandiose finale to a series baked with mystery down to its literal foundations. The technical name for the structure, the story within the story, is mise en abîme, or placed within the abyss. The origin is heraldic in nature, a copy of the thing placed within the thing. In that final episode, we see a poster for the Big O, within the Big O. I mean, if that ain't this, I don't know what it is. I prefer that term, mise en abîme, to the now denigrated and decomposed meta. But I think that title of that film, Synecdoche New York, also works so coincidentally that it's honestly one of those maybe God does exist moments. For you see, Synecdoche is in itself a term meaning a piece which can represent the whole, or a whole represented within the piece. As an example, Roger's wristwatch is just such. It is both iconic of Roger, but also iconic of summoning the Big O, and iconic of the show The Big O as well. So with that in mind, like, come on. The city is literally called Paradigm, the example, modeled on New York no less. Paradigm City is quite literally a Synecdoche of New York. The parallels are disturbingly appropriate. Disturbing in that I seriously doubt Kaufman ever saw the Big O at any point. But Argon, what the hell does that mean? What is the point of this mystery? What is the truth? What created this? Oh, how delighted a question. In truth, I've already given it to you. Nostalgia. Nostalgia itself. In that film, it is the nostalgia of the protagonist, Caden Cotard, played by Hoffman, trying to replicate and understand his life, to recreate it and also fix it, and redo it. Like how Gordon Rosewater controlled Paradigm and created the clones as a means of reproducing something lost in the world. Both Gordon and Caden are directors on the set of the play. Both stepped away from their masterpiece, because it quite literally expanded beyond and around them. But beyond that, it was what I've already mentioned, that the Big O itself is quite literally a work driven to capture something. Sato, Konaka, and Karayama felt needed reviving. Karayama. I intended to make an animation what we saw in TV shows like Oretachi wa Tenshita and Tante Monogatari when we were children. I want people to feel what we felt as children. If people don't feel that way, we didn't do a good job. A cool adult hero who summons a giant robot in a nostalgic idea of New York, who battles giant monsters and robots themselves designed in a nostalgic way, who finds mysteries, comedies, and horrors. A classic tokusatsu-inspired mecha story. A design of a mecha which ignored the modern trends of mecha design, which reverted back to, as they said, a gimmick-based, stiff super robot with none of the blocky mechanical joints. In fact, why is it called the Big O at all? Even the name provides us this truth right in front of us. Sato. It is actually from Daitetsujin 17. Karayama, the one that goes, oh, oh, oh. Sato. Yes, yes, yes. O sounds cool in Japanese. It's used in lordly titles like Dono, and king in Japanese is just O. Keiichi Sato was born in 1965. Daitetsujin 17 aired in 1977. So a cool robot theme song playing King, 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 or Lord, Lord, Lord would leave a big impression on a 12-year-old. I know Eureka 7 certainly left a big impact for me at 12. I still think that show rules. Why does the Big O have huge arms? Because Red and then Mach Baron had huge arms. The Big O's face? Inazuma and Robot Detective K. As Sato says, the Big O has an expressionless mask because I want people to feel it's a bit scary. It's true that it could look like a champion of justice, since it acts heroic, but it has a mask, and you don't know when it might turn into a monster. In any case, it's scary. Just like Mazinger, it could be an angel or a devil. In either case, its very iron and steel is nostalgic. And the Big O's mechanical design? Sato. Our intention was that it cannot twist its body a lot, so we decided to make it rather like a robot suit. Katayama. Like in the live-action shows where the robot is a guy in a suit, we rationalized by having two different suits, one for standing and the other for action scenes. Sato. I told everybody that if you want to move the joints, feel free to wrinkle it. Everybody was too scared to attempt it though. So you know, tokusatsu suits. So also, basically, nostalgia. So once again, the answer is nostalgia. To resurrect something from the past. A memory, if you would. But Argon, it was all going to be explained in Season 3! I have heard this over so many years. But sorry, there was never going to be a Season 3. It wasn't cancelled. The original plan was a 2-part, 26-episode series. Konaka. I heard that the entire story was planned to be divided largely into 2-part episodes. Sato. Yes, that is right. Hasegawa. Yes, we planned to run 26 episodes. Konaka. So, I think we automatically thought that we should decrease the number of 2-part episodes. The Big O is complete with episode 26. There's nothing left. Nothing missing. But Argon, I thought Konaka was told to reveal the mystery with Season 2. If that is the case, then why is the mystery itself so much more prominent, if the end result is just this damn nostalgia? If the point of the Big O is just to be the Big O, I mean, isn't there something more? Well, thankfully Andy cleared that up pretty nicely. Andy. Director Kazuyoshi Katayama recalls Cartoon Network having 2 requirements of Season 2. More action and to reveal the mystery. Can you elaborate on that? DeMarco. That may be his recollection, but that's not mine. When developing Season 2, it became clear that the creators, particularly the writers, Chiaki Konaka, were interested in exploring the philosophical concepts behind Paradigm City, and in a large sense, the unreality of the world of the Big O. The script got very esoteric. However, we did not tell them to reveal the mystery per se. My direct note, and I quote, was, "You don't have to explain why everything is happening, but you do have to make it clear what is happening." They nodded their heads and said that made sense. That was really the only major note, to be honest. So no, Season 2 is all there is, the mystery, the simulation of the world. The point is that Angel will reset the world once more, ideally into a better accepting version of the Big O. As Season 2 ends, so did it begin, with Roger coming to grips with the fact that the mystery of the lost memories are secondary to his main role, that of being the negotiator of Paradigm City, the dominus of the colossal mecha, the Big O, but really to living in the here and now. Or to put it most bluntly, like the Mise en Abîme, the point of the mystery of the Big O is that it's a show called the Big O. With this in mind, all the mystery makes very simple and direct sense. Norman knew how to repair the Big O because he's the Alfred to Roger's Batman. Alex Rosewater hates Roger because despite his wealth and power, Alex, not a little bit like Lex Luthor, perhaps subconsciously knows he's not the main character. He's not Roger. His drive to find and activate Big Fow is driven by this inferiority complex. He was one of the clones, one of the actors created to fill out the stage where only Roger is playing the main part, as the photo shows. Angel's pivotal role is that of the main off-again, on-again love interest, but even more mysteriously, as a woman pulling the strings but unable to simply live. Like Ada Wong in Resident Evil, or the OG Fujiko Mine. Cursed to move from one identity to another, but never settled or really comfortable with herself. Her ultimate decision, despite seemingly told she, like, Haruhi Suzumiya, is God, is to still reset the world to a largely similar state. This is also why Dorothy is so good. Dorothy has desires, but isn't as haunted by them in the end. This is also why her role is somewhat diminished towards the ending and finale. She is more so contented, and maybe more than any other character. While her buried memories torment her, at times, and cause her captors to pursue her, it's not a coincidence that she is the one who ultimately saves Roger in the nick of time. Maybe this is what Schwarzwald was driven to madness by as well. Ultimately the truth that the world was a stage for the action of the Big O. Is his coming apocalypse some grand mystery, or does he merely know the show is going to end soon? Is the background ruins being, more advanced underground some evidence of a lost past? Or is it just the symbolism of nostalgic writers, directors, and producers, showing their hand that they missed the futuristic Japan they grew up in? After all, there was another famous expo that took place in 1970 when they were still quite young. As a further interesting note, right as the Big O was getting made in 1998, another Western film, Dark City, would come out. A film about a city whose citizens' memories were obscured and lost to them. Another work of nostalgia, whose aesthetic was made out of the neo-noir and Art Deco cityscapes. A story centered on two characters searching for truth. The Big O was part of this bigger wave, a wave made from nostalgia. Nostalgia in parallel. The opening is a classic silhouette and spinning psychedelic background sequence, just like various Ultraman and Tokusatsu. And for God's sake, the original opening is one fat, giant Queen reference. The second one is a Costco Great Savings off-brand version of the Jerry Anderson UFO opening, for God's sakes. To Starsky and Hutch, to detective serials, to friggin' Bewitched, to, of course, the wonderful Batman animated series. It was always nostalgia. The point of the Big O was to revive the memories of 40 years ago, the pop culture styles, the cool futuristic robots, the crazy monsters, the Manhattan Art Deco world, the jazzy urban soundscapes, the snarky girl robots, the cool guys, the crazy villains, the catsuit Bond babes. If you enjoyed and loved all of that, congrats. You solved the mystery, the true mystery, how to keep the precious passions and memories one holds dear as an adult, left over from the long-distant days of youth. How to make the beginning into the end, or even more simply and bluntly, how to make something old into something really, really, really stylishly fucking cool and new. And overall, that is beautiful. So there you have it. I promised the truth, and I delivered. The so-called mystery of the Big O solved once and for all. So go out, watch it, or rewatch it. Even if you think you've absorbed it and don't need to, I'm telling you now, go solve that mystery by enjoying this giant, beautiful passion project. This love letter to a love letter. This world made of homage. This Synecdoche New York. This negotiator on behalf of the Big O feels satisfied. I believe we have come to terms. What? What? You're still here? Really? Are you really not satisfied? Seriously? You're just staring at a black void. There's nothing even in front of you. Go! Go, be happy. I won't blame you. There's nothing to worry about or feel guilty about. Seriously, enjoy the show. It's a good show. What? Oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me you're like me. Oh no, really, I feel pretty bad now. You just can't leave it, can you? You can't leave well enough alone. Well, it's gonna be like that. Follow me now, it's almost time. You know I feel torn up about this, right? I suffered a long time to find this. This wasn't something I saw elsewhere. Now you just have to sit there and take it in. You realize how unfair this feels. Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm glad you care as much as you do. You know, we both like this show, that's good. But you know, I do worry a bit about these things. I imagine people telling these things at parties, noting them so casually as if they came up with them themselves. Sorry, do I sound covetous? Sorry. This road I walk isn't an easy one, it can be a bit of a burden. Because, you know, I am glad that I can share what I know. Glad it makes people happy, even if for me, it has mostly meant treading in the darkness under the false sky of ignorance, just trying to find the real light of truth. It's what I learned from Master Schwarzwald. to never give up searching for that truth. Not even justice. I want to get the truth. Wise words for sure. So just do me a favor. When you think of the knowledge I'm about to give you, when you're sitting wherever life takes you, just spare a moment to consider me in the process. It's a small gesture, but I can accept at least that for my efforts to bring you here now, being remembered that I spoke these words. In a way, this is all that really anyone has to remain of themselves long after we are gone. The memory alone, it is all people wish for. To be remembered in memory. It's all I could really ask for either. Oh, and if you see those pathetic, ignorant fools like Bennett the Sage or Retcon 404, help them across the street. Or better yet, just ignore them. They are so pitiably blind. Sophia has never once made her breath felt inside their empty, hollow forms. They are the clay of the blind lord for certain. Ah, we have arrived. What, you don't recognize this place? It's your seat. Please, get comfortable. The show is just about to begin. We were waiting for you, you see. Ah, good. Now, without any further delay...
Right away! Let's get started!
Big O! It's showtime! Open your eyes. The place is a cliff by the desert. Feel the heat of the sun winding down to afternoon. At the base of the cliff, a pile of rubble has built up. The debris of millennia. Something is here, sleeping within that dream, the dream of truth of what we seek. There it can be found, the answer to the mystery you cling to. A few men approach, 3 brothers riding camels. They know this place can have good, rich soil, fertile from the erosion above. They stop by the shade of the cliff to rest and dig into the soil. There they awaken that which has waited here so very long. 1,500 or 1,600 years. It is a series of containers. Inside these pots has slept wisdom itself. Lost wisdom. Lost memories from eons past. Codices, books, written on papyrus. 52 texts, of which 41 were not even known to exist. It is, in its own way, by its own standards, a miracle the wisdom survived. The year is 1945. What we seek has just been found. In time, over the course of decades, the translation efforts take place. Others return here hoping to find clues as to how it survived or who saved it. This lost library. As Marvin Mayers notes, from the ground we can learn nothing more. It yields only bits of bone, scraps of fabric, and pot shards. But perhaps it is not just a miracle. As historian Brett Devereaux notes, Egypt is uniquely blessed for this effort. This comes down to climate, as do most things. Egypt is climatically extreme a place. On the one hand, most of the country is desert, and here I mean hard desert, with absolutely minuscule amounts of precipitation. On the other hand, the Nile River creates a fertile, at points almost lush, band cutting through the country running to the coast. The change between these two environments is extremely stark. It is, I have been told, entirely possible in many places to stand with one foot in the green life and another foot in the harsh desert death. That in turn matters because while Egypt was hardly the only arid region Rome controlled, it was the only place where you were likely to find very many large settlements and lots of people living in such close proximity to such extremely arid environments. Other large North African settlements tend to be coastal, and that in turn matters for preservation. When objects are deposited, lost, thrown away, carefully placed in a sanctuary, whatever, they begin to degrade. Organic objects, textiles, leather, paper, wood, rot, as microorganisms use them as food, while metal objects oxidize, that is, rust. Aridity arrests, at least somewhat, both processes. Consequently, things survive from the Roman period, or indeed from even further ancient periods, in Egypt that simply wouldn't survive almost anywhere else. For that is where the treasure was found, Egypt, whose Nile sired many gods, faiths, and wisdoms. The texts contained within date back to that same Roman period of Egypt. perhaps sometime in the 4th or 3rd century, Common Era, or, relevant to us, Anno Domini, the years of our Lord. The contents of the books are a shocking find. It is a record of religious works. Their nature and truth can be called Christian, but they are, well, a memory, once forced out of the world, a preserved fragment of an ancient form of Christianity, which was only mentioned in passing rumor before. They were written in Coptic, an ancient language of Egypt. Those who wrote the Gospels found were disciples of the disciples of the disciples of Jesus Christ, removed only twice from that immense historical figure. The reason no trace had existed before was simple. Those in power of Christianity in Egypt long ago disliked, feared, or generally wanted to erase the existence of this group entirely. Since they assumed that this gospel was heretical, they knew what to expect in terms of content. After all, church fathers like Irenaeus basically had defined, or some would say invented, heresy. Irenaeus explains that the heretics are Gnostics, by which he means dualists who believe that the world was created by an evil power, and so they have a dismally negative view of the world, and the God who created it. Furthermore, following Irenaeus' lead, many of these scholars also assumed the heretics are nihilistic, and the works they revered would be full of philosophical speculation and bizarre mythology. The Nag Hammadi Library, a treasure of lost Gnostic gospels, truths and knowledge. Gnosis meaning knowledge or awareness in Greek. The English cognitive has the same GN root. But I won't use this name because they did not mark themselves as this. Their enemies did. For them it was Christianity. Though odd perhaps to us, it is a form of that faith. What it centered on was a notion of knowledge and ignorance, of male and female aspects, Mary to Jesus, Adam to Eve, and as well, as we will soon see, the shadow and wisdom. What, you don't see it? You can't put it together? We've come so very close, the answers we seek are right here. Within Codex 1, 2, 6, and 13, within the Gospels of Truth, within On the Origin of the World, the untitled text, Thunder, Perfect Mind, and On the Rulers, or its true name, The Hypostasis of the Archons. Come now, from here I will make the truth plainly shown to you. Have no fear. As we will now plainly see, all the mysteries will now evaporate. Like the fog of sleep, Sophia sees over the world. You already know the elements: Roger, Angel, Dorothy, Gordon Rosewater, the Big O. All I need do is connect them with the thread of wisdom, and thus shine upon them the light called truth. After the world of the immortals was brought to completion, out of the infinite, a being with the likeness called Sophia, wisdom, flowed from Pistis, true faith. This being expressed its wish that it came to resemble the first light, and at once its wish appeared as a heavenly likeness with an incomprehensible greatness. This being came to be between the immortals and what came after them, like what is above, and Sophia served as a veil separating humanity from the things above. Angel, or as we know her full name to be, Angel Rosewater, a woman in search of knowledge. Angel Rosewater is Sophia. Sophia meaning wisdom, the wisdom of the world. In the text, Sophia is both an entity and a concept. Do not forget this. Sophia, the female aspect, is born of Pistis, faith, the original divinity. Philosophy, as we know it, is literally Philosophia, the love of wisdom. But in her arrogance, she creates another. When Pistis Sophia wanted to cause this thing with no spirit to be made into a likeness of the divine, and rule over matter and all its powers, for the first time an Archon appeared, out of the waters, lion-like in appearance, androgynous, with a great authority in himself, but ignorant of where he came from. Angel, the original director of this world, who surrendered power to Gordon. When Pistis Sophia saw him moving in the depths of the waters, she said to him, "Young man, naive one, move over here," which is the meaning of Yaldabaoth. The name here is specific. Phonetically, it can be traced to the melding of Yahweh, yes, that Yahweh, the Hebrew God of the Old Testament, he who was once a storm god of a wandering tribe, before fusing with El. Here the texts make plain that this god, which we identify now with the Christian God of the Old Testament, was a false thing. The ruler, Yaldabaoth, is ignorant of the powers of Pistis. He did not see her face, but in the water he saw the likeness that spoke to him, and from that voice he called himself Yaldabaoth. Those who are perfect call him Ariel, because he is like a lion. After Yaldabaoth assumed authority over matter, Pistis Sophia withdrew up to her light. Most know this one by another name, the Demiurge, a being who falsely believes himself creator of the world, incapable of accepting Sophia Pistis, the wisdom of faith. Think! Who matches this description? A man who thought himself ruler of the world of Paradigm, who presided over it. Yes, Gordon Rosewater. When the ruler saw his greatness, he saw only himself and nothing else except water and darkness. He thought that only he existed. His thought was completed by means of the word, and it appeared as a spirit, moving to and fro over the waters. When the spirit appeared, the ruler separated the watery substance into one region, and the dry substance into another region. From matter, the ruler created for himself a dwelling place and called it heaven, and from matter he created a footstool and called it earth. Gordon, the architect of Paradigm, who created the domes as paradise for the chosen, who left the rest outside on Earth. Since the chief creator, Yaldabaoth, had great authorities at his disposal, he created beautiful heavens by means of the word, as dwelling places for each of his sons. And in each heaven he created great glories, 7 times glorious. Each son was within his heaven thrones, mansions, temples, chariots, virgin spirits and their glories, extending up to an invisible realm, as well as armies of divine, lordly, angelic, and archangelic powers, myriads without number, so they might serve. Gordon, who created the children, who ruled over the domes. Upon creation of the world, the Demiurge causes Sophia to withdraw, to recede and yield power over the world to him. As Angel in the Big O has the scars showing her fall from grace, but is also the true director. In this triumph, he exclaims the line of the classic Old Testament. He was delighted. He boasted over and over again and said to them, I don't need anything. He said, I am God, and there is no other but me. Afterward, the ruler thought according to his nature, and he created an androgynous being by means of the word. He opened his mouth and cooed to him. When his, the son's, eyes were opened, he saw his father and said to him, E. So his father called him Ea. Again he created the second son and cooed to him. He opened his eyes and said to his father, A. And so his father called him Eloi. Again he created the third son and cooed to him. He opened his eyes and said to his father, As. And so his father called him Astaphios. These are the 3 sons of the father. Having created and ruled paradise, he retires, say to a nice farm. Those created by Yaldabaoth become the rulers of the world, the Archons, itself meaning ruler. These who are associated with gods, like Eloi or El, Adonaios, the holy Hebrew name of God, and some concepts like Oreos for wealth. In one swoop, the text denotes all these effigies as false sub-apparitions of the Demiurge's design, as it is written in the hypostasis. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, as he said, but against the world archons of this darkness and the spirits of evil. Within Paradigm, the chiefs of police, the heads of the powerful families, all the mad scientists reflect these self-dreaming rulers. For the other meaning of Archon is that of the rulers of the Greek city-states. After the heavens, their powers, and their entire government were established, the chief creator exalted himself. He was glorified by a whole army of angels. All the gods and their angels praised and glorified him. You see, as much as they were abstract evil, the Archons also represented the powers that be, the governments, other religions, all who wished to suppress the texts, as they were called by them, the Gnostics. You see, the Archons, those who are governed elements of the polis, the city, Paradigm City, the world and state of the Big O. The elites are the Archons of Paradigm. See how much it matches, what fearful symmetry. Even Alan Gabriel fits this scheme. Gabriel, an archangel and messenger of God, though in this case the false god of Yaldabaoth, who serves the Archon of Alex Rosewater in his will. But what if the most obvious is Alex Rosewater, the inheritor of the throne of power? For do you remember, in the flashback with the children, the revelation is that Alex is merely another one of Gordon's tomatoes, another creation, another agent the Demiurge had, one of his sons. So too is Alex a creation of Gordon, for as it is written, Yaldabaoth doth produce myriad spawn. And like the palaces of heaven, the Demiurge constructs for his sons wonders. Alex as well lives in such a paradise. But then, what of you-know-who? What of Roger Smith? What of the protagonist? Who could he be? Do I even need say it? The answer echoes forth from within the Gospels. For one of the Archons stands apart. 7 androgynous beings appeared in chaos, and they have masculine names and feminine names. Sabaoth's feminine name is Divinity. When Sabaoth, son of Yaldabaoth, heard of the voice of Pistis, he sang songs of praise to her, but he condemned his father and mother on account of the words of Pistis. He glorified her because she told them about the immortal human and the light of the human. Pistis Sophia pointed her finger and poured over him light from her light, as a condemnation of his father. When Sabaoth was enlightened, he received great authority over all the powers of chaos, and since then he has been called Lord of the Powers. Unlike the other Archons, Sabaoth, which is Aramaic for powers, rejected his father, Yaldabaoth. In rejecting, he was granted power. That's right. What again is the name of those who control the Mecca of the Big O? The Dominus, of the original Roman, master of the home, or bluntly, the lord of the house. The Roman phrase, Domine Deus, the name of God, for the world is God's home, to dominate. Sounds an awful lot like a Lord of the Powers, doesn't it? One granted the power of a god. As it is said, the Dominus of the Mega Deus. As the hymn of Sanctus speaks, Sanctus, 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 Dominus Deus Sabaoth. For us becoming Dominus Mega Deus Sabaoth, Lord of the Powers of the Big O, Roger Smith. And as the true power of God is that of Pistis Sophia, of the wisdom of faith, then Roger is thus Sabaoth. And who is most jealous of Roger's unique blessing? Alex Rosewater, who is already an Archon over all of creation. All of the authorities of chaos were jealous of Sabaoth because of his light. They were upset, and they waged a great war in the 7 heavens. No, I hear you cry out. No! But yes! For who commands the most powerful Big? Big Venus! Yes, Angel. Ha! See how obvious it all is now. Feel the mystery draining away, truth crystallizing. Venus. Oh, how the weak-minded cry out. The fallen angel. Satan, surely. Wrong! Surface-level mirages. Venus, who was Inan and Ishtar, the queen of heaven, as Sophia was to the Gnostics, the divine feminine. And what then? Oh, what then, what then? Of the other bigs. Here we must for a moment part with the Nag Hammadi texts, for as it is told to us directly, we must refer to a more conventional source. In episode 17, Schwarzwald's pamphlet shows it bluntly. William Blake's Leviathan and Behemoth. First, the most tragically neglected sibling, Ziz. Ziz, who is ruler of the skies. Big Duo fills the role of Ziz from the Agadah rabbinical texts. As Leviathan is the king of fishes, so the Ziz is appointed to rule over the birds. His name comes from the variety of tastes his flesh has. It tastes like this, Zeb, and like that, Zeb. The Ziz is a monstrosity of size as Leviathan himself. His ankles rest on the earth, and his head reaches into the very sky. And of Leviathan, Wait, I hear you think, though you do not speak it. The Leviathan is a machine, it can't be Big Fowl, not a big robot. A robot serpent is what Schwarzwald finds. Oh, don't worry! Don't you know there are 2 Leviathans in the Bible, my good friend? Schwarzwald's beast is that of the Psalms, 74:12-17. Yet God, my King, is from of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. You divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him as food for the creatures of the wilderness. The older Leviathan, the primordial serpent of chaos slain by the great Sky Father. Apophis killed each day by Ra. Jormungandr against Odin and Thor. Baal-Hadad who slew Yam. This is the serpent of chaos that Schwarzwald finds, a creature reducing the order of the world into a wasteland. The older Leviathan Psalms attributes God defeating. The other Leviathan, that is the second, is that of Job. That depicted on Schwarzwald's pamphlet. Do you know? Leviathan's name meaning to coil, to go circular, to twist. Like the blades of a propeller. From the Book of Job. I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength and its graceful form. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils, as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from its mouth. Strength resides in its neck. Dismay goes before it. Nothing on earth is its equal. A creature without fear. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is king over all that are proud. Yes! The second Leviathan, that of the Lord, is Big Fowl, king over the proud Alex Rosewater. Of course, this leaves only one remaining, the master of the land, the other one whose name means beast, Behemoth. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in the muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of its thighs are close-knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze, and its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among the works of God. First among the ranks of God. The Big O, whose name can mean Great Lord. All of the Bigs are named Mega Deus, massive gods. Cast in the name of God, ye not guilty. The axe of the executioner, free of sin, agents of the true God as well, like the Kyojin of Miyazaki, or the Ultramen of Tsuburaya, or the Evangelions of Anno. But the name hides a secret meaning, our last detour before returning, which I must admit may be coincidence. For within mathematics lies something, a tool used to describe how much complexity emerges over time from an algorithm or function, a function against which can be measured the whole. Big O notation. Within the algorithm of the ideal, within paradigm, within the city, the Big O is that which emerges. But halt! I hear your heart cry out. This doesn't actually add up. Sabaoth is supposed to dwell in heaven. Sabaoth who is son of Yaldabaoth. Roger who is not the son of Gordon. This is all madness. All false. Ah, I am glad your heart and mind did bring this argument to light, because I have more. For you see, you are correct. There is another whom the act of Roger Smith could fill. From the hypostasis of the Archons. The leader of the authorities is blind because of his power, ignorance, and arrogance. He said, with power, I am God. There is no other but me. When he said this, he sinned against the realm of the O. This boast rose up to incorruptibility, and a voice answered from the incorruptibility and said, You are wrong, Samael, which means blind God. The rulers made plans and said, Come, let's create a human of soil from the earth. They formed their creature of a being entirely of earth. That's right, feel it coming into view. For Roger, by this logic, was no creation of the Demiurge, as was. Later the Spirit saw the person of soul upon the ground. The Spirit came forth from the adamantine land. It descended and made its home within him. and that person became a living soul, and the spirit called his name Adam, since he was found moving around upon the ground. Roger, who holds a special place and power within Paradigm, on earth as it is in heaven, as the old saying goes. The rulers took Adam and put him in the garden, that he might cultivate it and watch over it. They commanded him and said, "You may eat from every tree in the garden, but do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Do not touch it, for the day you eat from it, you will surely die." They said this to him, but they did not understand what they said to him. Rather, by the Father's will, they said this in such a way that Adam might eat, and Adam might not perceive them as would a completely material person. Who protects Paradigm? Who watches over the city? It is Roger. Who made some kind of deal with Gordon? Roger. If Paradigm is in its own way to Gordon paradise, yet Roger is an agent who negotiates, then like Adam, Roger negotiates between Angel, Sophia, and Gordon, the Demiurge. And like Adam, he is expelled from the paradise of the domes and lives out in the earth. Yet remember as well Gordon and Roger's conversation. Gordon advises him to ignore the past. Ignore Metropolis. And Metropolis is half empty. The answer now as to why should be simple. Gordon was never the lord of the world in truth. That was Angel. So all he created was incomplete. As was all he knew. And his advice for Roger, to forget, to ignore memories. How very, very convenient for someone who has the power to reshape the world. The rulers plotted together and said, "Come, let's make a deep sleep fall upon Adam." So Adam slept. The deep sleep they made to fall upon him, and he slept in ignorance. They cut open his side, like a living woman. Then they repaired his side with his flesh in place of her, and Adam had only a soul. You see, I have already anticipated your next question, the question of the mind. If Roger is not just Sabaoth, but also perhaps Adam, then Angel, who is Sophia, could also be. The woman of spirit came to him and spoke with him, saying, "Arise, Adam." When he saw her, he said, "You have given me life. You will be called the mother of the living, for she is my mother. She is physician, woman who has given birth." That's right, Eve. The Gnostic Christian Eve. The masculine and feminine in heaven are as like on earth. And to put the cherry on top, the Archons who tried to assault this Eve. The authorities approached their Adam. When they saw his female partner speaking with him, they became aroused and lusted after her. They said to each other, "Come, let's ejaculate our semen in her." And they chased her, but she laughed at them, and because of their foolishness and blindness, in their grasp she turned into a tree. And when she left for them a shadow of herself that looked like her, they defiled it sexually. They defiled the seal of her voice, and so they convicted themselves through the form they had shaped in their own image. Like Fujiko Mine, Angel evades the pursuit of the material world, evades the assault of the false rulers. Angel, who is ultimately she who decides. What then, in final truth, is Dorothy? An android built of memories. A feminine arising from wisdom itself. In her own way, Dorothy as well is another form of Sophia, a young form of a young girl, hidden behind superhuman agility and strength, wit and deep knowledge. Dorothy here as well fills out the role nicely. In both the finale of Season 2 and its first episode, Dorothy is the one who accompanied Roger in his vital moments and saved him. Arise, Adam, most certain, for if Angel is doomed to serve in her role as director, then Dorothy is to Roger the Eve to the Adam, the pairs, the dualism made manifest. So there you have it, the truth, the mystery removed as written in the Gospel of Truth. But ignorance of the Father brought terror and fear, and terror grew dense like a fog so that no one could see it. Thus error grew powerful. She worked on her material substance in vain. Since she did not know truth, she assumed a fashioned figure and prepared, with power and in beauty, a substitute for truth. These are the excuses. That there would be another season, that there would be more. But I hear something, faintly. For what do I hear in your heart at last, but who is responsible, and how could this be? Oh, I do wonder. Who on the staff could be, say, a Japanese writer? renowned for his use of esoteric knowledge and mysteries, who wrote just such stories over and over. A person whose interests, likely 25 years ago, had him think, within his thoughts and associations, these ancient truths and a story of a man in a black suit with android girl and a humongous robot. Such a person would doubtless be easy to find with such specific a personality. Someone pulling the show in his creative direction. Using the right connections one day many years ago, following in the path of Master Schwarzwald, I came upon this truth, and I dared to go the final step, the final distance, confronting the Maker with his makings, confirming in his elusive way that truth which lay before me, and now you, now before us all. This was not humiliating, for the illimitable, inconceivable one, for this terror and forgetfulness, and this deceptive figure were as nothing. Whereas established truth is unchanging, unperturbed, and beyond beauty, for this reason despises error. And so there it is, before you all. Witness what I have witnessed, see how I saw it, by chance of endless pursuit, as Master Schwarzwald taught me, of Sophia Pistis, of truth of wisdom. The fog is gone, now the light of that truth is great. Let it shine in as I have made open for it. Of course, knowing Mr. Konaka, I must leave you with another note. I must also respectably say this is not the only interpretation, though this is the light of truth I choose to shine. There are others, and Konaka does enjoy some ambiguity in his mysteries. As someone who felt alive in the search for truth, I know he as well enjoys all the possible flavors it can take. So, should you find someone arrogantly repeating my words here, as I clearly see taking place in the future, and acting as this is the only answer, you have my free permission to rudely berate him into submission. This is my answer to the mystery of the Big O. I give it to you, but there are others. No matter what, as Schwarzwald spoke, the importance is to think. Think about these wonderful shadowed mysteries in the light of truth. Think as it was written in the 6th Codex of faithful wisdom itself. Thunder, perfect mind. I was sent from the power, and have come to those who contemplate me. I am found among those who seek me. Look at me, you who contemplate me, and you who hear, listen to me. You awaiting me, take me to yourselves. Do not banish me from before your eyes. Do not let your voice be hateful towards me, nor your hearing. Do not be ignorant of me, in any place, at any time. Be alert. Do not be ignorant of me. I will not tolerate an ignorant humankind. With that, the show is complete. The curtain lowers on this city of amnesia, its false ruler and his son, its Sophia, its negotiator, his robotic Eve, and his great lord. Yet now, after all, wisdom prevails. At last, we have come to terms.